If you're not working on jet engines and going to potentially have problems with people flying in the air and it malfunctioning, you probably don't need a perfect process. Everything that I do is with a lens of how do we make things simpler and more automated. What I've learned over the last year and a half as a consultant is that a process is a process. You use the same types of systems. It's just about how you enable people to leverage them best.
Lauren, thank you for joining me on Just One Thing. I am so excited to have this conversation with you. Welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And before we kind of get rolling on stuff, I love to, maybe you could share a little bit about your background, your work history, maybe some fun aspects of your life as well.
Fun aspects. Okay, so for professional, I've been in media my entire career. I actually started on the agency side as a media planner. I started as a B2B print planner, which meant that I was putting Sonicare ads in dental office magazines. So we've come a long way. Uh, but shortly after that, did some stints in account management, led training, and then just realized that I'm a systems girl. I love how things work. I love hearing challenges and kind of dissecting what's best. So the last few roles have all been focused on business operations and building out ad technology stacks for places like Netflix, Hulu, Disney, Roku. So lots of CTV in there. And then about a year and a half ago, decided to go out on my own and do consulting just to spread the love a little bit more. And I'm also COO at Autovera, which is another modern consultancy. So we're jamming on all fronts right now.
So you're consulting and you're now co-founder CEO of your own business, your own operation.
Yes, correct. So there's my own operation, and then there's also Autovera, which is with two other individuals, Adam Svoboda and Ava Ashley. We had been building for the last year, which has, things like outsourcing, consulting, and a lot of AI implementation, which is the hot topic of the moment.
Oh my God. Yes. Wow. I just need to tell you, I'm like, have you used Lovable at all?
I have used Lovable, but minimally. I've been using Claude is my new favorite. I feel like it changes every week. Actually, this week and last week, I've been a part of the U of Digital. I don't know if you know them, but U of Digital's AI Accelerator course. And it has been phenomenal because I feel like I'm learning new ways to use the tools. I feel like with AI, it's so hard to even understand how to use it because anything could be AI. So you're like, all right, well, how do I synthesize what I even want it to do? So that's been really fun. I've been testing new tools over the last 2 weeks because of that course. It's been awesome.
Oh God, that sounds great. And that's a U of what is it?
U of Digital started probably around a decade ago by Shiv Gupta, a former colleague of mine at AOL. And yeah, he invited me to come along and check it out and get to speak on its behalf. So here you go, Shiv. You're welcome.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so if anyone, myself included, is interested in getting more information, what's the URL?
Hmm. Think it's uofdigital.com. Wait, let's look. Let's see. It is U of dot digital. Look at that.
U of like DOT dot
Like
digital.
UOF.
U
U
of
of. Yeah, like University of Digital.
Got it. Super intuitive. Love that. Good branding. Okay, cool. I definitely want to get back into that because I'm like, God, there's so much that
It's been
I'm
fun.
absolutely in love with AI for years now. Really moving to the other side of like beyond like ChatGPT, Claude for like, strategy, copy, content, and so on, and been moving more into like practical application and usage. I definitely want to get in, want to hear about, any kind of like what you're doing and what we can learn from you. But before we do that, maybe let's kind of like, you've got like a very, very interesting work background. I've got your profile up here. As you mentioned, I mean, boy, if I go back, you spent, right, you were at Condé Nast for a couple years, AOL, Director of Global Business Operations and Strategy for almost 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Boy, that's that
Yeah. Yeah, that was a
all the
fun one.
discs, I mean,
Oh,
you were
yeah.
very much
Well,
later.
to be fair, it was post-disc era. I don't know if I look that old.
I am that old though. I am that old.
I mean, I received them, but I didn't work there while that was happening. But I will say AOL, the journey was interesting because it was like a series of mergers and acquisitions. So
Mm.
they were an excellent company to merge and acquire these other companies that could help them with their ecosystem. And as a result, I learned a lot about integrating technology, integrating people and process, and how do you go to market as a single force. And despite the fact that it's still running today, but in a very different capacity, it was very fun and I learned a lot. And in particular, when Verizon we were helping to set up the sale for Verizon to purchase them back in the day. The CFO of Verizon had contacted me to be a part of their Six Sigma program, which was very interesting as well. And I don't know if you know what Six Sigma is, but it's essentially like, how do you become the most perfect process ever? It was invented by GE. It's kind of like, if you're not working on jet engines and going to potentially have problems with people flying in the air and it malfunctioning, you probably don't need a perfect process, but it gave me the tools and capabilities to understand, how to look at things differently and what's actually bringing value to a customer versus like what's just an internal rule for being an internal rule. So it's been cool. Yeah.
And that's a very strong foundation for everything you've done since. So I'm curious because I'm looking at your, your background. You spent a couple of years at Hulu, head of business enablement, another year at Disney, ad product and innovation, another 2 years at Roku, head of business operations, Netflix, another year advertising and tool. Maybe kind of just give us a. I mean, there's clearly like a theme to
Yeah.
your, but
Yeah.
maybe kind of like give some context. Like this is what you've been doing. These are the strengths. This is what you've tried to do, in these different roles and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So essentially everything that I do is with a lens of how do we make things simpler and more automated. So I've always kind of sat on this team on the business side or technology side that would speak both languages, right? So talking to engineers, talking to the product managers and the head of product, if not reporting to them, really setting up the strategy based on what the business challenges are, whether that be revenue scale, operation scale, cutting costs, which is like the worst part, and making sure that organizations are set up in the most proper way. And I really feel like AOL gave me that background, right? Where Verizon had me come in and really learn the fundamentals of how to do that, which a lot of it can be done without that Six Sigma certification, but it is nice to have it. And, it essentially set me up for being able to do a process engagement with almost anywhere, right? So what I've learned over the last year and a half as a consultant is that a process is a process. It doesn't matter what field it's in. I stepped outside of media for some of my engagements with consulting, and it didn't matter. Like a sales process is the same everywhere. You use the same types of systems. It's just about how you enable people to leverage them best. And so that's really what I've been doing all these years with a side of training because I do happen to love enablement. And if the systems can't be built well enough that it's self explanatory, you also need a good communicator to help people actually come through and make sure that they're using the tools properly and
Mhm.
maximizing revenue. So that's really always been my goal. And I've always sat either on this product technology side or within the sales organization. It depends on who thinks they need the help the most. Usually I'm hired by the operators, right? Like a head of operations, a COO, to come in and say, hey, listen, it's a black box what we're doing. We don't know why it's so difficult. Can you talk to our technology team and translate what our needs are? But then on the product side, people will want to pull me in and actually help transcribe those requirements into, okay, give us context on the business, make sure that it's built properly. Can you actually review our UX? Can you review, the flows that we're building?
Mm.
So it's given me a lot of opportunity to see business from a lot of different facets, which has been cool
Right.
and
So
supporting lots of
it's a lot
teams,
more
right?
it's a lot more than like technology, like what you're doing.
A lot more. Yeah, it's
A
it's
lot more.
people, it's process, it's systems, it's making sure
Yeah.
that teams are set up for success. It's just that I like to focus on the technology part of that, especially these days, because that's how you enable people usually in the best way is by
Yeah.
automating their workflow.
Yeah. Let's just jump straight into that. I mean, like we could dig in your past. I would love to, let me kind of, in fact, let me kind of like frame my question a little bit. So, I mean, we're 3.5 years in almost since about 3.5 years since OpenAI released ChatGPT. In those 3 years, it's been a period of from my experience, and I'm like day one on my ChatGPT. I'm an early adopter of technology, and I had stopped using Google like a while back for search. As
Love
soon as
it.
I started using ChatGPT, I'm like, oh, that's it. I will never, you don't have to use search because I don't want list of results or websites. I just want answers to my questions and help me think
That's
things
right.
through, et cetera. So I've been like very early. And I think when I think about the last 3 years in this world, it's been a period of a very strong mix of excitement and, confusion
Apprehension.
and anxiety,
Yeah.
right? And I'm talking from, like, a business marketing perspective.
Yes. Yes.
And it was last summer when I started playing around with Lovable one night. And I started at 10:30 at night, and I couldn't stop playing with Lovable. It was 3:30 in the morning, I went to sleep,
You're up all night.
I'm back on it again, and I spent hundreds of hours, like building websites and experiences with Lovable until I really kinda hit the limits, started hitting the limits of what it could do, right? It just keeps
Mhm.
but when I started using it, that next day, I got on a team call and a creative call where we typically, our process, and this is really applicable to anybody that works in marketing, where we're having a call where we are talking about projects and now we were reviewing designs that would then go and, we were reviewing like designs for content, landing pages, things of this nature, ads, which would then go into production, some of which goes to developers, needs to be developed, and then we go through a QA process, and then we publish, et cetera, et cetera. And I came in that morning and said, everything changes as of today. It all changes. This workflow, because I've been in the digital marketing space since 1995, as early the beginning of the modern
Beginning of time.
1995, Netscape released Netscape Navigator, that mid-year, right? I was into it 2 years before already, like, deep into it, teaching myself HTML, and I have so much experience building and, building websites and website experiences and digital and media campaigns and things, and one night with Lovable, I woke up that morning, I'm like, "That whole workflow, as of today, changes." Now for about a month and a half, I'm with my team. I'm trying to figure out how do I structure us so that we can kind of like operate with a much more efficient workflow. And by the end of the summer, I said, wow, this is a much bigger project and like, guys, we can change how we can like marketers can now go and we can like design websites, well designed, well written. I have like a UX designer, a conversion rate optimization specialist, a brand marketer, a digital marketer, a copywriter,
Oh,
all
man.
rolled into one. And me having so much experience produce, I can do it all myself now, but with some support. And by the end of the summer, I said, wow, this is way more complex than I thought. So this is the context for like, I would love to understand from your perspective with AI tools that we have and the constant rapid development and leapfrogging and new tools coming to play, but fundamentally built around the core LLMs. Like, how does one even approach it? How does one even begin to kind of approach what to do, how to do it, how do and I'm not talking about like an organizational change at that level, even at a team level, a
Mhm.
marketing team that's responsible for UA growth, for a mobile business, which is like that's our bread and butter. Like, how do you have all this experience? Like, how do you approach it? What do you recommend? What do you
Yeah.
share? With clients?
I mean, I think that enterprise tools, as we know them, are going to become the back end tools, right? So it's not that we don't still need them, it's that these AI interfaces are going to become the front end that you can communicate with, right? On top of your Microsoft, your Salesforce, your order management, your trade desk, et cetera. And so I think it's about figuring out what pieces to work on first, which is what people tend to have the most difficult part of doing is identifying because like I said earlier, you can literally do anything on AI. I mean, you literally can watch it think and it goes through code and it goes through and so how do you make sure that you're starting with the most impactful areas but also starting small because the truth is that there are hallucinations, there are errors and there is a lot of human judgment and guardrails that have to go along with it. So I have a fairly positive outlook about AI, but that's potentially not the norm. I do feel like the way we work is changing, but it's really just changing the baseline. It's not stopping humans from working, right? We still need to put the system in place. We still need to make the guardrails. We need to give it the context of why we're a unique business and why we're differentiators, and tell it who our target audiences seemingly can be. But we can use the AI as almost like a conversationalist of like brainstorming ideas. You could even use it in your meetings, right? And say, listen, we just came up with this persona that we want to target. What do you think? Who are the five others that you would think, knowing that this is the marketing brief, knowing that this is our logo, these are our colors, this is our brand guidelines? And I think eventually AI could, of course, create all of that for you, but it'll look so generic, right? It's not going to be unique. It's not going to feel differentiated if you let AI do all the work for you, which is why I don't feel like roles are going to be completely eliminated, right? I do feel like it's going to become more efficient, but I do think that it's going to become a baseline worker in our organization. And I think that there was an article, I can't remember who to quote, but it was something about McKinsey where McKinsey said that by the end of X years, it's like 3 to 5 years from now, there's going to be one agent per every worker that they have. And essentially, it becomes like your assistant, right? So, in a way, it almost makes us smarter. And I think that that moving of the baseline means that no one really needs expertise in their particular industry. So, for instance, we've been a very closed industry to other cultural groups, right? People that are not going to school for this or don't have an in. Now, all of a sudden, all the knowledge base already exists, right? It's just that they have to know how to activate on it. They have to know how to ask the right questions. And I think almost everyone is going to become pretty great at that. So you have to become more of an operator working alongside the AI than being replaced by it.
Yeah, I completely understand that, and I agree. I will say though that yeah, I mean, personal opinion, with me, me having like a variety of AI tools that I use. Like I said, like I'm like building a microsite in Lovable for a very large conference. Like kind of taking a very different approach. Like I don't need to work with all these people anymore. I don't have to pay the communication tax. I don't need to schedule meetings. It's just me. So it's like more of my time, but overall, it's probably, the effort is probably 1/10 the amount of overall time it would take to kinda go from, like, concept to a very, very polished, microsite experience, and
That
so,
that
I'm like,
feels right to me. Yeah, it
yeah,
almost, like, just accelerates the work from A to Z with you guiding the system to do it, and it probably doesn't take as many people to do that task. What I think becomes more important is relationships and actually, having sellers out there selling your product is going to be more important than ever because everything is gonna be fairly generic, and you're gonna be able to get some differentiation in there, but those people, the relationships are what's gonna matter and how you're gonna sell moving forward even more than it was before, and as you probably know, media has always been a people business, right? So we thrive on that. The after hour drinks are still gonna flow. That's what
yes.
I think anyway.
That's been my experience too. Tell me a little bit, kinda like, let's go into that direction a little bit, like because you have a lot of experience, like, in the world of media. Maybe kinda share some of your thoughts around the space,
Just in general?
just in general or
Oh,
specific, wherever you
yeah.
wanna yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, tomorrow I'll be attending the AdTech Economic Forum, which I think is an incredible conference for learning about how you actually are being perceived, how our industry is being perceived by Wall Street and financial executives who are actually influencing our industry. So I might have a lot more to say about that after this week. But I do feel like my personal opinion is that, things are consolidating. I think that there's a lot more opportunity to build your own thing. I think that there's a lot more opportunity and expertise actually leaving the large corporations that we've had before. So they're consolidating all of these brands, they're consolidating all of these companies, but a lot of the expertise, the people at higher levels are tending to find that they want to put their expertise to work in consulting, in micro roles, right? And so it's been interesting to see that shift. I get probably 10 to 15 messages a week about people that are, interested in just serving one company anymore because the loyalty is fractional at this point. So that's been really interesting. And also the industry in general, um, you know, we're all nervous about the open web. how do we band together as a group of publishers, not you, but a group of publishers to make sure that there's still content for AI to even read, right? Because otherwise we're all screwed. So coming up with a new model for that where we can actually receive revenue on the ways that AI is crawling the sites and understanding how to be a part of that ecosystem rather than just be used by it is going to become really important. Otherwise, the AI will be leveraging historical data soon enough because there won't be
Yeah,
enough to keep the lights on at all of these websites. So that's part of I think where the industry is shifting to gosh, we already optimized for search X number of years ago. Now we need to optimize for AI. We need to figure this out and band together. So from the publisher perspective, that's what I'm hearing a lot of is
interesting.
the nervousness there
Yeah, for good reason.
for a good reason.
I mean, for
They
really
also,
good reason.
yeah.
AI goes, they scan and they summarize and they provide summaries and insights and recommendations, and you'll never land on a publisher site.
And to be fair, social media started that a long time ago, right? I mean, it's always been that way for the last at least 10 years, but this is expounding upon that exponentially. So I think that the threat is real. And so you're seeing organizations pop up or the IAB come together to bring publishers, together to make decisions on how we can capitalize on this in a different way so that we can stay alive, which is
Yeah.
interesting. And I have no doubt that we will figure it out. It just might take a little while. But yeah, and there's also, it's interesting because there's also this whole ad CP stuff coming out, right? Ad context protocol, which have you heard of that?
I have not, no.
Okay, so Ad Context Protocol is essentially banded together by some founding companies so that anyone can create agents that talk agent to agent for direct buys. So even though the industry may kill me about saying this, it's almost like programmatic for direct, the way that it was supposed to be built. And so as a result, you're seeing these companies like Scope 3, TechBlaze, Swivel, et cetera, building out these agents, a buyer agent talking to a seller agent. There's negotiation completely in sync, right? What happens to rate cards? What happens to preferred rates? How do we not bottom out? So there's a lot going on there so that we're not cannibalizing our own inventory. And then, of course, there's still the programmatic channel to contend with. So
My
it's
goodness.
yeah. So there's a lot coming up in the next year, I'd say.
Right, right. So at Biddies, our market is all in-app. It's all
Hmm.
in-app, right?
Yep.
All in-app advertising, in-app experiences, and so on. Yeah, we're not buying or, in any way part of the open web. Publishers
Yep.
have apps, they try to monetize
Lucky.
users for advertising, right? And then everything we do is we just I mean, has like the entire, the majority of like the mobile in-app inventory or industry, it's all programmatic. I mean, it's
Hmm.
all programmatic buying.
Yep. Yep.
So, oh, super, yeah, super. Let me ask you because this is something that comes up. It's come up a number of times, and from like people within, like my CEO, for example, this will come up like, "Hey, take a look at this. I'm talking to this guy reached out, or I spoke with this guy who's basically, saying, talking about how we're not visible to the LLMs, and it's important for us to be visible to the LLMs, and as a B2 tech, like mobile ad tech company, I learned years ago at my prior company, Liftoff. I spent 8.5 years there. When I first joined, I'm coming in, I got a lot of experience with SaaS marketing and so on. And I'm like, and I immediately bring my SaaS playbook and which includes like heavy SEO, paid search. And a full year in, I'm sitting here analyzing what impact paid and organic had on pipeline and revenue. Cause
Hmm.
as a mobile DSP is like for us, there's no self-serve, it's all managed service. Right, and so, so there's like, you're basically generating leads, qualified leads, hand them off to sales in 3 to 6 months, convert those into closed one, ideally, contracts. But after a year of heavy paid search and organic, I sat there, I really analyzed what impact did it have on pipeline, and it was like the amount that I spent with an agency on SEO and the amount that I spent on paid search was equal to the amount of gross revenue I generated from the handful of customers who we acquired, they spent for a short period of time, and then they churned. And at that point, I stepped back and I said, "You know what's going on? This is search is not how people in our industry and the marketers go and discover DSPs and the
Nope.
companies that they want to work with at all."
Yep. Nope.
So fast forward to like 10 years later, here it is coming to me from all angles. Hey, your space not
Same
visible.
problem, different tool.
Right? And it's the same problem, but for us, it's not a to me, I go, "Why?" I don't know why it's a problem because at the end of the day, the companies we wanna be working with, the people wanna be talking to, they're not gonna go to, ChatGPT or Claude to, like, find a DSP. So maybe they're, like,
Mhm.
doing some research, get some questions
Sure.
answered, maybe we show up with some of those questions, maybe it influences their thinking about, about biddies, but at the end of the day, I look at that, I'm like, it's a non-starter. I don't wanna invest any time and resources into that. So there's other businesses, other verticals, certainly consumers, it makes a lot more sense, but, like, I'd like to just get your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think listen, I agree with you that it's probably not gonna be the final decision maker, but to be not visible at all, like, as a consultant, for instance, when I'm evaluating different technology vendors, I do go to my ChatGPT and my Claude, and I say, "Give me some deep research on all of the players in this field," right? And so if you're not accessible, I may miss you entirely, right? And so that's the one piece that I would say for people that aren't familiar with biddies, probably not that many in the industry. For those that aren't, you're really not reaching them, right? So you want to be a part of the conversation, but again, it's not going to push you toward the end of that line, which is where I think that that conversation from earlier coming in with relationships and selling becomes really important. I think that these in-person events and conferences and community gatherings are going to become some of the most important things for our industry moving forward, and sponsoring those events and being visible there and having one-on-one meetings while you're there, just like we do today, is going to become a lot more important. And I am seeing that there's a lot of openness to that, right? So for instance, Possible is becoming a huge event down in Miami, and it's all about marketing. It's all about these brands coming together. It's almost like a mini can all in one spot. And the truth is that everyone wants to meet with you while you're there. And it's one place to go and say, okay, I've got my 50 meetings and I'm going to try to make it work. It's an old model, but it's becoming more important, right? So finding the ones that are the best fit for you, creating thought leadership and white papers that can be accessible via the LLMs would be interesting so that you're producing content so that the LLM can ingest that and actually quote you and source you. That's an inadvertent way to do it, an indirect way to show that you're a thought leader, which again, all of these are old tactics. It's just about their importance level is moving up the chain. The PR is becoming more important than the paid stuff, you know?
Mm,
It's
mm.
interesting.
That's a good perspective. Yeah, that's a very good perspective. Like, there's a vendor we just signed with that that we're beginning to work with. And what do we do? Like, we had a call, and they did a really nice job. We did the research. But then one person from my team, I think she went probably to ChatGPT. She's like, I need research. What do you have on this company? And it led her to, like, was it G2? What is the platform that'll review, right? I think it ultimately led her, like, I think believe it surfaced in ChatGPT, and then she dug deeper. So we're like, hey, we have some context around what other people working with this company feel, what their sentiments,
Mhm.
perspectives are, and then we said, yeah, let's go with it. So I think it's a very good. I hadn't actually considered it that way. That makes a lot of sense.
And I also think that, something I'm learning in this course that I'm taking right now is being able to bounce ideas from a marketing perspective off of the LLM. Like, listen, that's obvious, but actually having it create your audience segments and understanding who the personas are that you're supposed to go after and what you look like to those personas is going to be important. And you can also just ask, based on activity that you see on the internet, where does my brand stand, right? Like, ask it where it stands and what the gaps are and how you can become more present in the tool without paying, without becoming a crazy investor in these LLMs. I would actually ask it to look you up and see what it says, you
That's
know?
a great idea.
Yeah.
These are like
Just
really,
learned that.
really. There's such like simple recommendations.
They're very tactical. I'm all about simplicity and, like, giving people actual homework to do, you know? Like,
Yeah,
I feel like I don't want it to feel like this big theoretical thing. It's essentially saying, "Hey, I have an analyst at my disposal. Can you do the work for me?" And it's over in 5 minutes instead of 5 weeks.
yeah. Oh
So,
my God,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
yes.
for
Yes.
sure.
Okay. Yeah. These are really good suggestions. Another question I have for you is, so, at this point, we really have like the big three LLMs, right? We've got ChatGPT. Claude, and Gemini. Those are like the big 3. And I find, um, from my experience, I started off for years, I'm just ChatGPT. Claude starts making noise. I start dabbling a little bit, go back to Gemini out of nowhere, finally, kinda like ups their game, them and, Gemini and Claude, what do they do? They're like, "Cut out all the rambling and let's be less verbose than ChatGPT. Let's
Mhm,
focus on some core competencies."
mhm.
Claude recently, like, "Hey, we can now produce spreadsheets," which are, like, insane,
Yep,
insane.
yep.
But
I
with
just
that
had it
being
create an entire marketing deck for me, and I was like, "Alright, thank you so much. This is great."
so insane. It's so insane what Claude can do these days, and I've barely even begun dabbling with Claude Cowork. But I think the question I have for you is for any marketer out there, who's like, I use ChatGPT, a decent amount. I haven't like crossed over to like using agents or actually creating much, and I hear a lot about Claude and Gemini. Like, do you have any recommendations from your experience and how you would recommend, marketers kind of approach the tools?
Yeah, I think, and this is from my limited knowledge, right? Like I feel like things change literally every day. So this could be refreshed in a week, I'm sure. But ChatGPT, I tend to use like my coworker. I literally talk to it as if it's my coworker. I'm like, hey, in my voice, could you help me revitalize this conversation from this email on 228, whatever. And I actually have it help me, draft things and help me think through things, right? I brainstorm with ChatGPT. Whereas with Claude, I like to use it more for like deep research and visualizations. So, listen, I want to understand my competitive set. Can you create a document for me that shows a scorecard of here are the different areas I'm evaluating? Are there any other things I should be evaluating when I'm looking at these different vendors or publishers, et cetera? And it does really deep research because it's really scouring more areas, is what it feels like on the web. And of course, you have Claude Code, which I'm just starting to dabble into. Actually, just yesterday, I had just for my personal life, I was like, all right, I feel like I need somebody to go into my calendar and tell me who am I meeting with? What's the news on those people? Where are their LinkedIn statuses and posts lately? And also, what do I want to talk to them about? So I have it scour my email, I have it scour my Google Docs, my PowerPoint, my Excel on everything from the last month or two. I say recent, right? I make sure it's to say recency bias for sure. And it literally nightly pulls together an agenda for me for the next day of what I need to focus on and think about. And again, it's not rocket science,
Right.
right? It's just, oh, wow, it can really do that. Like I'm so used to synthesizing all of that myself. And the truth is that in just the one time that I've done it so far, literally overnight, it hit on every single point that I wanted to today. And so I think that there's a way to utilize the co-work and the code tool to really work to your advantage without being a developer. Listen, I'm not trying to necessarily create microsites like you. I'm not trying, maybe one day, but I definitely need help in visualizations and creating PowerPoints. So I've heard that Claude plus Gamma is like the end all be all for like PowerPoint and deck visualization. So I have yet, I'm literally about to try it tomorrow. And then what was the third tool that we said? We said Gemini. So Gemini, it has come up for sure. It's getting there. I think what it does best is because it does see across your entire ecosystem, especially if you're a Google user. But I will say Claude does that too. So I feel that it's still a little bit stronger. I haven't dabbled in Gemini as much because I haven't heard that many great things about it.
Yeah. 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 Fair enough. I want to tell you a little story.
Please.
Short little story is I
Yep.
did this 2 nights ago. I have outside of like biddies, I have a online neon site website business.
Cool.
We bought it a few years ago. Basically, and we spend right now, we're up to about like 18 to $20,000 a month on paid search campaigns on Google, right? ROAS 5.5x return on ad spend, very healthy. And I was sitting there talking to my wife about Steve, who manages our campaigns, and I was sitting there saying, yeah, Steve does a great job. I really like him. And we have really strong performance on our campaigns. He does a really good job. I'm not an expert in running paid search. I've never looked at our campaigns. I don't know how efficient they are. I don't know if we're
Mhm.
wasting money. I don't know if they could be performing better. I actually have no idea. And so what I did was I spent about an hour, it took me about an hour. I went, I took a whole large set of data over like a 6-month period, right? Or like all Google ad campaign data, Shopify sales data, all everything's all, tied to campaigns and so on. And I fed it into ChatGPT and then I fed into Claude, and I said, "Analyze all this. Tell me what you
Mm.
see, what recommendations, what
Ooh, fun
changes."
experiment.
Okay. And ChatGPT, verbose, right? A lot of detail. Hey, good performance, but let me tell you what's really going on. You're combining events in a campaign, so Google's doesn't know what to optimize for, so you're inefficient there. Recommendations on restructure the campaigns. It was very quite thorough and long.
Mhm.
Claude, short response. It. Oh, sorry. Let me go deeper. And like, because Claude is usually quick and short. Like, let's get straight to it. Let me go straight to building spreadsheets, straight to building an HTML dashboard, straight to it, asking questions. Really, really good. But I'm like, no, no, no. Analyze. So it
Yeah,
came back with more
take it back.
analysis.
Yeah. I
Then
feel like
I
it's Oh, go, 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 go.
Then I took my ChatGPT analysis and I fed it to Claude. I said, "This is what ChatGPT said. Analyze," because it didn't capture a lot of what ChatGPT saw. So it
Uh-huh.
analyzes, "Oh, it's got a lot of good stuff, a lot of good recommendations. Here's where it's off base." And it told me it was
Mm.
off base specifically around um, expected increase in revenue by making, up to like 40%, increase in revenue by optimizing the campaigns further. Claude's like, "No way, 15 to 25% max." But in terms of the details and recommendations of ChatGPT, Claude said, "These are very good, but it's wrong in the assumptions of revenue increase by optimizing your campaigns." Then I took all of that, and I never done this before, and I fed into Gemini.
Wow.
I said, "Gemini, and here's all the data, and here's what both platforms are, what both platforms say, their analysis, their recommendations, right? What do you think?" And Gemini came back and it said, "Oh, I love that you're pitting us all against each other." Whoever coded that, nice
Love
personality.
it.
And then it gave me its assessment. And let me tell you, it highlighted something that neither ChatGPT nor Claude highlighted. So we have like again neon signs, right? We have a campaign targeting podcasters, podcast neon sign, right? We sell a fairly decent amount, but both Claude and ChatGPT said, "Hey, this campaign is so efficient. You should be spending more money on it. Put more money into it." Both of them said it. Gemini said, "There's something wrong with this campaign. There's an attribution issues. There's absolutely no way you could be generating so many conversions at such a low cost. Something is wrong. Here's what you need to look into. You're combining conversion. Something is absolutely wrong with your data." And I'm like, if I just stuck with ChatGPT and Claude, I'd be like, "Let's go put more money into a podcast-based search campaign." And Gemini's like, "No, no, no, don't do that. Troubleshoot what's going on there, understand what's going on before anything." I had to use 3 tools to get to that.
And I wonder, it's interesting because, of course, it just depends on what data it's leveraging. And of course, Gemini has access to GAM information and how well it works, and it understands the ad business better than the other two. So
I think
that's
so.
very interesting. I feel like
I
that.
think so.
Wow. Now I got to try something like
Interesting.
that.
So, I'm like, how come I would assume Claude would have caught that and it didn't
I
catch
would have assumed that, but that is interesting. It probably is because Google has a huge ad business. Really. It's so interesting.
I lean in that direction myself, lean in that direction. I think, one more question, and then, I appreciate all the extra time here, is, boy, what was I gonna ask you? So there was a lot of, I talked to a lot of marketers in the industry. These are like mobile growth, user acquisition marketers, mid, senior people, right? I have a lot of, lot of conversations with people these days around their use and adoption of AI tools. And, and it kind of runs the gamut of like, we're experimenting. We need to be doing more to, but yeah, we're starting to get a little bit more advanced with like using AI for like, definitely in our world, it's like for generating like hundreds of ad variations, feeding like data and ads that, perform well, don't perform, and having like tools like Claude analyze and come up with like very, very, very specific recommendations and so on. And then feeding that into tools that will then generate based off of recommendations. So there's a lot going into that space. But the one thing that I find really interesting, and I saw this the other, I think it was at GDC or somewhere, someone, or I was reading it online, wherever it was. So there is a growing number of growth marketers who, when it comes to like gathering and analyzing data, they often are using like a BI analyst for it, or they're aggregating all the data themselves into a spreadsheet or a dashboard, and then they're manually analyzing it. And I'm hearing a number of these marketers who are in our industry. They're like, no, no, no. You know what I'm doing? I'm actually using Claude Cowork, right? To feed that data, or Claude Code, directly connecting with some of the services, or they're just copying and pasting, and like, "Analyze this for me. What do you see? What do you recommend?" Right? "What do you recommend in? What do you recommend?" And they're again, now they're kind of bypassing like the standard workflow, and the people that they use, because like, we don't want to wait. I want to make decisions right now. And just like what I did last night or 2 nights ago with like all of our paid search data. And I'm sort of, so that I see this, I'm like, oh man, I think about the companies that have like, reporting systems where that you pull and ingest data from all the, right, that try to do this and normalize data in a way that marketers can look and make decisions. And here we are, like, I'm seeing more and more marketers saying, no, 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 I'm just grabbing all my data, throwing it into Claude and analyzing it and making decisions like that. Like, do you hear about this? Do you see this going on? Like, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts around this?
Well, listen, I see it going on, but more at the individual level, not necessarily sanctioned by entire teams yet. And I think that that's because so many companies are struggling to normalize their data and to create a for AI to actually generate the correct responses, right? So, yes, you're accelerating the work. To me, that's acceleration, right? An analyst no longer needs to be pushing buttons and moving cells and deleting columns, because once AI knows how to do it once, they can do it again, right? That's also another thing, is that I feel like eventually the normalization of data can also be done through AI. I think that it takes a lot of human input right now to make that happen, and probably for a very long time. But I do think that analysts become more strategic. That's really where all of our roles are headed. We all become more strategic. We all become more insightful about, oh, well, here are the things that it caught, right? Here's the things that the AI caught. But here's the context that we maybe forgot to give it, right? And if you're not good at giving that context and actually crafting a prompt that makes sense for the data to be interpretive, you're going to get responses that are incomplete, just like your tool to tool to tool story, right? And so I think in general, you have to give it the context. It has to have it, right? And the data has to be set up properly. So, yes, but I'm seeing a lot of individuals use it on teams. Like, yeah, it's approved at the enterprise level. People are playing around with it, but nobody's really trusting it to the full extent that it should be yet. And I think that that's correct.
Yeah, yeah. So if you are, so I want to, like, we can wrap this up, but I really just, it's like Biddies is a great example of a tech company. We're a strong organization. We're filled with really talented people across the org, across regions, across departments, right? But when it comes to our, use and adoption of AI, it remains, for the most part, at an individual level. And I love to understand, because you're all about, like, working with companies and like building out, strategies and processes for doing some transformation, like, including like, like figuring out how to like build systems to automate work so people can spend their time on higher value work and so on. And Biddies is
Mhm.
a great example of this. Like, what is that? Like, do you have any recommendations? Is there a flow to it? Like, kind of give some visibility into what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, I think that having evangelists, listen, I'm a consultant, so I do feel like having somebody who is at the forefront, who can be considered an expert, which there are not that many of us yet, but there will be, right? Soon enough. Come into your organization, actually evaluate your data set, basically do a giant x ray on your business and say, well, here are the areas that make sense to even enable first, right? Because that's where you're going to see the maximum input and output. And so I think that that's where you have to start, right? You have to have somebody come in who's fresh eyes to learn about your business to even know where to start. And then it's about defining the use cases. Okay, so I have these use cases that will be the top 10 most impactful, but here are the top 10 simple ones to get started with, right? So impact versus simple. Start with simple, right? Don't start with the high impact because it'll be too difficult. And so you start with simple, you potentially hire a firm, right, to help you build out the first few, right? Because you probably need to get your data in order. You got to get your house in order first, right? So you get the data in order, you get your workflows ingested, you provide the AI with suggestions on what you want it to look like in the future and potentially code or whatever you want to do with it. And then you're able to actually do implementation. The truth is that if you've never done an implementation before, of course, you can attempt at the individual level to do that. But I would say bringing somebody in-house that knows what they're doing, at least for the first 1 to 2, because then you'll be able to do it, right? Like once you watch once or twice, it gives you a lot more brain power behind it. Like, oh, I see what's happening, right? So I don't want to pitch myself out of a job, but I do think that eventually these enterprise organizations will have entire teams of just AI strategists. And that's where a lot of these automation teams will go. There won't be
Mm,
as many developers, there won't be as many engineers or product managers. It'll actually be business people that will be able to talk to these systems and help implement. But until we get there where people have dedicated teams of educated people, you probably need to bring somebody in to help you. And that's really just to make sure that you don't, people are trying to boil the ocean. That's the problem, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great advice. That's great advice. I will tell you, just like I think about the smallest examples. Like 2 days ago, here comes an email. Like we're sponsoring an event in New York City next week, and here comes the email. Shared with a handful of us, which includes a link to the registration list. Here's all the people that registered. Right? We're sponsored, so we get visibility into, like, like, who they are, email, job title, and company. And our process, like, I dig in, "Hey, what do we do with this?" Well, we have this list, it's only limited number of people at Biddies have access, so we created our own version, and as new names get added, we copy and paste them, and then we Slack the sales team, like in the US, saying, "Hey, we added more names. Take a look."
Mhm.
And now what does the sales team do? They look at it, they go do names. "Oh, I know I'm gonna reach out. This is a qualified lead." We're not even automating, like showing like, "Hey, these are the tiered." So and they go, "Oh, let me go and start. I'm gonna go reach out to them and invite them to the dinner, da, 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 da," et cetera, right? And I
Mhm.
look at all that, and when I ask these questions, Hmm. My first thought is, well, it would be nice if we caught to automate, so you don't have to manually do that. But that's nothing. That's nothing. The other thing I did was I just took the entire list and I threw it into Claude. Said, hey, tell me what I got here. We're sponsoring an event. Biddies, our business, and it came back with like the absolute beautiful analysis and recommendations. It says, and I didn't feed it accounts that are, tiered accounts. It's just I didn't give it anything. It doesn't know that side of
Mhm.
didn't feed it anything. It's not plugged into Salesforce. But I just gave the list and it says, listen, based upon everything you know about your business, there's 15 names on this account. These are the people you want to be going in this list. These are the people you want to go and have conversations with. Invite them to your dinner, invite them onto the bagel train. Right? You want to go and try to get meetings with these 15 people out of 100 and a list of 150 people. And then it broke down the rest and it said, okay, these are a group of off It could be good off a job title and company, and then here's a whole group of people. Don't waste your time. And I
Mm.
looked at that, I'm like, I want to automate this. This should be the process.
Yeah.
Plus running through our system, so
Yeah.
it's
How
in
do you plug it into Salesforce so that then you can have marketing automation against those and you can have lead assignments based off of that, right? Like it's not too far off. You almost have to start with a simple process like that to then even envision what could be possible, is what I think. It's like you start small, but then all of a sudden you're coming up with an entire roadmap. So it's like, oh, well, it was repeatable for this event. So now we can do it for every event, or we can do it for all of our marketing automation. We can always qualify our leads with Claude, and we can always have it tier and set our accounts, right? So I think it's about running things small so that you can trust it first and so that you can tweak the process before it becomes unruly. And then you start to really integrate it into your workflows. Again, it's kind of like just treating it like your employee or your teammate, right? And saying, hey, I really just need help like thinking through which of the top prospects would be great to invite to this event. And all of a sudden, ask it what the next step would be, right? Like say, listen, how would you embed this in my workflow? Like knowing that I have Salesforce, knowing that I have XYZ, and I use this event software, what would you do? What code should I build to enable this? So ask it, you know, and then you start to create a roadmap long term once you start to see what's possible, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see.
I know, everything like, "Well, I don't know." But no, it's really good
We'll see.
advice. Yeah, it's really good advice. I think the idea of, like, hey, think of it as, like, a coworker at this point where I'm like, "Hey, I got a list. Can you grab the here's the list. Go and analyze it. Identify those who we really wanna put attention to, we'd wanna invite to dinner." And it's like, "Okay, boom, and here's everything else." Thank you so much for joining. Very interesting conversation, very insightful. You know, the experience that you have, like, it's like, there's not a lot of people that have that experience, and you're so well positioned for this AI, this AI era and helping companies figure out how to adopt this and build it into their workflows and, and business operations. That's where I have a lot of interest in that. So I really do appreciate you joining, sharing your thoughts, and I hope you have a great day.